welcome to Tete the Opera Festival for the first time in Newcastle. Okay, you're awake. My name's Bill Banks-Jones. I'm artistic director of Tete. I come miles, so I live in West Cornwall, but our music director lives in Newcastle, and we've been doing lots of work here and in North Shields for 6 years, I think. We're really, really happy to bring the festival here, which is a big part of the company's work. We have a big festival in London with 20 to 30 pieces. I think what ties Tim and I together is a feeling of wanting to share the fabulous experiences we've had in big opera companies, but to support and extend their work by making work that's more relatable in easier to access places, and also intimate tete-a-tete places like this where you're really up close. I've got a lot of slightly dull things to tell you. It will get very hot in here, so take as many clothes off as you're comfortable to do right now. Also, now that you've spent ages finding your seats, do feel free to shuffle around. We don't want to be snooty. Be as relaxed as possible. If you need a wee, just go and come back. That's fine. Don't want nobody will mind. Fire exits are there, and I'm told that should there be a fire, you'll hear an alarm, and you won't hear an alarm if there isn't a fire, and the ushers will help you to go to the right place. Please turn your phones off, and have I missed anything? Only to introduce, it must have been a Tuesday from the Hull Urban Opera. So what we have is two rather brilliantly true and very personal stories from each of our singers, followed by a light-hearted encore from each of them. But let me not hold you up any longer. Please welcome. We have Neil and Joanna singing. We've got Ellie on the violin and Russell, who created the whole thing. Welcome.
Where are you from? I'm from Leeds. Oh, I have an uncle in Leeds. Oh, that's nice. I so know what's coming next. 3, 2, 1. But where are you actually from? Before I answer that question, let me take you back a bit. I'm around 11 years old. It's morning form class, and the teacher, Mr. Hall, who is usually so funny, has just yelled my name and called me to the front. Why have you done this? He's pointing to a yellow school form and scrawled across it in big black marker are the words, "None of your fucking business." I die inside of embarrassment. I didn't do that, sir. Really aware of the quiet that has descended on the class as all the attention turns to me. Then who did it, Neil? He says in a manner that starts to make me feel a little uncomfortable because I didn't do it. So I start thinking fast. Okay, I got the form, I took it home, I gave it to my dad. The next morning, my dad hands me an envelope. My dad would never put a form in an envelope. It's a waste of paper, he'd say. My dad is the kind of guy that recycles and reuses everything. And I mean everything. As a child, it was very embarrassing, but now he's definitely hipster. Back to the story, an envelope. Oh, flip. I bet he put it in an envelope so I didn't see it. I'm really sorry, sir. I think it was my dad. He doesn't like answering questions about race or things like that. This is the silence that made me feel incredibly fragile. And I have remembered it vividly for almost 2 decades, but only recently discovered why. It was an announcement at the front of the class that I was different, and that I hadn't properly announced my exact differences to the school. Oh, Mr. Hall says. He goes red. I can't tell if he's angry, sympathetic, or embarrassed. And then his brain kicks in. Fine, sit down. I sit down. For decades, I put the feelings I had during incidents like this to being, not being strong enough, being weak, or stage fright. Get over it. But the truth is, that question, where are you from, to someone that has darker skin than white, is an ask to reveal what they are, so that sometimes they can be judged as acceptable or not. I'm sure some of you are thinking, what are you talking about? Or does that really matter? And those questions are valid and relevant to you. But to me, it really, really matters. If you have fair skin, you have the wonderful privilege of never having to think about your skin colour. Yes, fair-skinned people receive racist abuse, but 99% of the time, you really don't have to think about it. So when I get asked, where are you from? My best experience is someone wanting to find out more about me. And that can lead to more conversation or even friendship. But at the opposite end, it's someone wanting to find out if I'm the right or wrong shade of dark. And this can, and frequently has, led to really intense verbal, psychological, and physical violence. Up until 2022, I never told anyone about my negative experiences of being brown in the UK. Not my parents, my partner, my friends. But I told them that year because a few months earlier, 2 hugely significant acts of unprovoked racial violence caused a complete mental and physical collapse in me. I couldn't eat, I couldn't work, I couldn't sing, couldn't cry, I couldn't do anything. These acts were so life-destroying that they challenged everything I thought I knew about my life, and they faced me with a new reality. I had the fear that if I went out, I would meet someone that would want to do me significant harm for the colour of my skin or that I'm half Indian. I was immobilised. I couldn't leave the house. I was really scared, traumatised, and I was getting really sick. And at the depth of my depression in that period, I started to consider leaving this world. I made plans to commit suicide. But I met the most amazing racial trauma counsellor. And in my first session, a group session to only people of colour, she asked us all if we experienced certain things I have never told anyone. Certain things I wondered if everyone thought. And to clarify, these certain things, they're unique thoughts had by people of colour to navigate and survive in a world where you are constantly seen as less than or a minority, and where a very real danger exists. An example includes something called racial coding. You don't realise it, but here in the UK, so much of our language describes and flags racism. For example, the phrase, "My uncle is so bad." That phrase seems harmless. But to me, it's really useful code. Because someone telling me that their uncle is bad is probably that he's racist, and therefore more likely to say or do me harm. Mental note, avoid that uncle. If you think about it, bad uncles, bad parents, bad grandparents. They're not usually doing bad things in our presence. They're saying bad things, probably racist, misogynist, homophobic. And probably more difficult to stomach is that the people around them sometimes chuckle and say things like, "Stop it, you can't say that," but with a smile on their face. And in that lovely family room, no one gets hurt. And most likely no one is brown. But when that person is alone, in a pub say, and they meet someone like me, alone at the bar or in the toilet, that previously permitted racist behaviour sometimes sparks and incites them to do significantly more harmful things to me or someone else of colour. I can tell you now, since that inspirational session, that I found out that most white people don't get stopped by the police. I genuinely thought we all got stopped a lot. On average, I get stopped once a year. The last time was outside my own house. I was in my car and a policeman came over and asked me for my passport. I said, well, it's in my house. He asked me not to get out the car. And he asked me if my passport was a British passport. Moments like that make me freeze inside. And I think, as everyone of colour knows, that is code. He is telling me in no uncertain terms that he does not think I look like I could be British. Mental note, that policeman has a racial bias, Neil, be careful. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of all the things that have happened to me, so I'm going to speed this up. The highlights of 30 years of masking, dodging coded messages, and doing my best to assimilate include being beaten up, having my head caved into urinal walls, being punched in the face in broad daylight, being asked to take my top off and clean up urine in the street by police officers, and being warned that there is no room in opera for troublemakers like me. This led me for the majority of my life to do things like hide my Indian name, convince people I was Spanish, because I passed for European, and I learned at age 9 that being Spanish gets you beaten up a lot less than being Asian. To avoid my friends seeing my mom, I still have great shame about that one. And she looks Indian. To never be alone in rural pub toilets. And the oh so difficult but oh so important, deflect the question, where are you from? Hello, again. I'm now 4 years into therapy, with 3 therapists actually. One to help me overcome a particularly violent racial incident, and one to help me overcome being systematically underpaid, bullied, and work stripped by one of the leading operatic organizations of Europe, and one to help me deal with racists in the future. And it's working. I actually can't believe how much it's worked. Without these 3 therapists, I would never have told my parents what I've hidden from them for 2 decades. I'd never have told my sister, my partner, my friends, and now I'm even telling you. I choose life. Now, I choose to live fully. I choose to thrive and not just survive. And strangely, I do that by accepting that I am going to receive racist abuse in the future. I accept it. I accept that I'll probably be denied entry for my skin colour again. I accept that. I even accept that I might even be attacked again. And it feels really, really good to say it out loud. How do I accept that? Well, quite simply, it's reality, and I have to. More empowering to me now than the fear of one of those incidents recurring again is that I now have the courage, despite everything I've been through, to own who I am. So now when someone asks me, where are you from? I say, my name is Neil Balfour, I am mixed heritage, Indian Scottish, born in the Canary Islands, schooled in Lancashire, settled in Leeds. And to inject some joy into it, because some people's eyebrows are raised a little high at that point, I like to add, international man of mystery. I have the courage to grow a beard with brown skin. I have the courage to wear Indian and Western clothing publicly. And I have the courage to write a classical song cycle about Indian men and women who fought and died for the British Empire in World War I. All these choices make me a target, an unmistakable racial target. But it's who I am, and I'm proud to say it now. Some days I can't believe it took me 36 years to actually tell people who I am. But I can do it now. So if any of you ask me, I'll say, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll flip and tell you.
I must have been almost 18 when my mother got the letter from a lawyer in Green Bay, Wisconsin, informing her that my father, her former husband, had committed suicide. He'd sealed up the garage and turned on the ignition to his new car. It didn't affect me in any way you might expect. It felt more like something resolving, the tying up of a loose end. I didn't feel any grief. He hadn't been in my life since I was a baby. I felt sorry for my mother, who said she still loved him after all these years. And my sister, Caro, 2 years older, well, she said she remembered him and missed him. But for me, that was that. The letter went on to say there was a small bequest to each of us in his will. I'm not sure we'd even have been informed otherwise. The bulk of his estate, such as it was to go to his second wife, Consuela, in Brazil, and their 2 sons, Charles and Enrique. Charles apparently was 9, Enrique 5. Charles and Enrique. We'd known there were children from the second marriage, boys. But this is the first time I'd heard their names. Do you want anything to do with them, Mum asked. She felt she should write to Consuela. I couldn't imagine it. My interest didn't stretch beyond a mild curiosity. And the practicalities, they were only little. They lived in Rio. We didn't speak Portuguese and didn't know if they spoke any English. Best leave it, was our considered response. Years, maybe a decade, went by. On the odd occasion we discussed the possibility of getting in touch with them, but neither of us wanted to take the plunge. At the time of my parents' divorce, we'd been completely dropped by my father's family, his parents and siblings. It's pretty much how things were at the time. And my mother's family were numerous and always available. It seemed best just to let sleeping dogs lie. And besides which, neither of us wanted to cause any sadness to my mother. It was around this time also that she told us we also had a half-sister, not much younger than me, living with her mother 6 miles away in Cherry Hinton. The mother, Antoinette, was the first enormous nail in the coffin of my parents' marriage. So they were the enemy, and contacting them was out of the question. More years, probably another decade, went by. And then I received a message, in 2008 it was, on Friends Reunited. It was extraordinary that it got through to me. I hadn't used a site in years, although it had enabled my husband to find me 14 years after we left university. But that's for another story. Are you the Joanna Gamble who used to live in Little Shelford? The message said. If so, I'm your cousin, Simon. Your brother Charles is here, and he'd like to meet you. I called my sister straight away. Shit! What are we going to do? Could we just carry on with our heads in the sand, or did we have to risk some awkward emotional encounter? Just to ignore the message seemed callous. My mother had died earlier that year, so we couldn't hide behind not hurting her feelings. Cara was reluctant, but I felt guilty that we'd ignored them all this time. We were the older ones. Maybe we should have got in touch. Anyhow, it was me they contacted, so I had to respond one way or another. And so it was that a few days later, I went to stay with my auntie in Paddington. Charles had gone to London, and she, helpfully, had suggested that if we were to meet for a coffee at the station hotel, she could come with me for moral support. I don't know what I expected. I was a little apprehensive, a little reluctant, and even slightly resentful. The previously tucked away loose end was threatening to unravel. I certainly wasn't prepared for what came next. Seated at a round table, somewhere inside the lobby, was quite unmistakably Charles. I'd seen pictures of my father, of course, but only as a much younger man than Charles was now. He looked the same, but different, like the cartoon version of somebody famous. It was the face of the man I'd taught myself to hold in disdain all my life. But it shone with joy and with longing. In that moment, I fell in love with a stranger about whom I knew next to nothing, except that we shared some genetic material. Extracting ourselves from a hug, we sat down on the sofa. There was room for three, but we sat side by side, thigh to thigh, calf to calf, clutching each other's hands, as if somehow proximity could make up for years of a life not shared. I don't remember the details of the conversation. It was eclipsed by the sensation that somehow a void in my life that I hadn't even known existed was suddenly filled. And it was wonderful. Well, Charles went back to Rio the next day, but returned to the UK early the next year for an extended visit. And he came to stay with us in Leeds so we could get to know one another better. My sister and her daughters met him and other members of my family on my mother's side, and she and I were introduced to cousins we'd been estranged from since childhood. So we met these cousins that we'd been estranged from since childhood. And then the following year, I went to Rio to meet little brother Enrique and Consuela, who technically, I suppose, is my mother-in-law. Not even that, my stepmother. Anyway, that first heady rush of feelings has stabilised into genuine warmth and affection. And although we don't get to see each other in the flesh very often, we do chat regularly now. Those half-brothers I didn't think I needed have become a welcome part of my life. And probably the best thing my father ever did for me. Now, whilst we've got you here, Captain, we thought we'd like just to give you a sneaky peek at some new work that's in the pipeline. It's a new operetta by Russell Plows, and it takes as a jumping off point the short story Mr. Tilly's Sails by E.F. Benson. And from this, Russell has, he's woven in some new characters, one of whom is Harry Houdini.
Harry Houdini, born Eric Weiss. And Russell has arranged this for baritone and violin. And in this little number, Houdini is pretty pissed off at all the other mediums capitalizing on exploiting people. And I think this is just after World War I, where mediums were infamous for saying that they could contact their dead sons and fathers for a price. So in this number, Houdini is going to expose them for frauds, and one in particular has just said that she can contact Houdini's mother, and his mother was very precious to him. So that was the last straw, really. When I was little Eric Weiss, I knew I had a mission, and much against Papa's advice, I trained as a magician. Deception was my life, I had a talent to astonish, but others took a darker path, they made their cash deceiving, the gullible and grieving. It's their repugnant thieving we've assembled to admonish. Since Margaret Fox and Henry Slade, since Home and Distibar, an intoxicated public came to see their repertoire, purveyors of the impossible in splendid exhibitions, which baffled men of solid sense when scrutinized correctly, were rendered duds directly. They were challenged to perform under laboratory conditions. The Lady Doyle invited me to one of her soirees, insisting my dead mother had a message to convey. We heard the pencil scratching amid all the usual clamour. In life, my dear Hungarian mother's English had a very reduced vocabulary. In death, though she communicates in perfect English grammar, so let us get to work, my friends. It's time for us to hatch the perfect plan to catch a certain Madam Cumberbatch. In donning our disguises, she'll fear nothing untoward. Our collaborator knows her cue, and while they're all enjoying the trick she is employing, we'll flood the room with gaslight and expose her as a fraud.
Now, another character who's got it in for Madame Cumberbatch is Madame Connaissant. But this is a very, very a rivalry with a long history, basically a love rivalry. They were after the same bloke. One had him, the other had him, and she got him back. Anyway, so let's meet Madame Connaissant. When I was only 17, big brown eyes but rather green, I met a man the like you've seen in every lady's magazine. My lover really cut a dash, 6'2" but sure and be laissez-faire. Oh, women, beware. She thought my boo a perfect match, and sought her way to disattach my darling Mr. Cumberbatch. To forge your dreams with her instead, a devious woman such as she is practised in mendacity. I'm going to bear your progeny, she said, and in a week they were wed. Women, beware, women, keep your husbands out of sight. Alley cats come out at night. Oh, women, beware. He found with my life with Madam C, filled him with anxiety. He soon came running back to me, despite it causing quite a stir. The last life in one final jest made its malice manifest. He died while doing what he loved best, just one